Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you for making it out here. Do you want to? Yeah, I mean, so this is a panel with the people who probably make this stuff like actually work. We have Scottilicious and Domer, two of the biggest Polymarket traders in the world. Very lucky to have them here. I will do a brief intro. I have a background in finance and also a little bit in media. I had a YouTube channel way back, but interviewing is not my my career at all. But I'm very excited to speak with two legends of the industry. It's a pretty young industry. Yeah, I guess like my first thing would love to learn a little bit more about like what brought you guys into prediction markets. Obviously, Scott, you were pursuing a PhD. Domer, you were a little bit more in the world of online betting and things along that line. So I'd love to hear, how'd you guys hear about it? What made you like want to make this your career?
Go ahead. Oh, me? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was just a college student right out of college, and poker was booming at the time. It's called the Chris Moneymaker effect, because every man won the World Series of Poker, and so everyone that was my age at the time was like, okay, if this guy can win the World Series of Poker, we could beat poker easily. So I joined poker when there was a big boom, especially in online poker. And then that very quickly led to discovering that there were these bets on politics and on movies and on things that I was already interested in as a person. These were my hobbies. And so I started to bet on them, and it's been 20 years. 2006 would have been my first bet, and it would have been InTrade, which doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, InTrade, PredictIt, Kalshi, Polymarket, the whole kit caboodle. Yeah.
So on my end, I was involved in a little bit in crypto. I had a real estate business where I rented properties out to nonprofits, and I guess a penchant for risk. So I found myself studying politics in grad school, and I did a master's thesis in 2025-ish about how the commodification of mortgages was bad for U.S. sovereignty, and nobody wanted to read the damn thing. And then next thing you know, it's the real estate crisis, and they're calling me back. The professors are calling me back. They're like, "Oh, you should try to get this published." And I was like, "I've already pieced out. Like, I'm gone. I'm back in the private sector." So in 2020, there were quite a few people betting that Biden was somehow going to be evicted from the White House and Trump was going to come in. And there was like an easy way to make 8% betting the no on that on Polymarket in about a month. I don't know how many of you guys have your own businesses, but 8% in a month for free money, like, can't beat that. So that was 4 years ago. Pretty much thought, okay, I don't want to gamble away the 40 grand that I just made, so I left it alone for a while. And then did I screw this up? Is this better? Is that better? Oh, much better. All right. Woohoo! Okay, so 2024, I'm in France. My dad's 90 years old. I'm taking care of him. I don't have much to do in my spare time when I'm not at the hospital or taking care of dad or trying to figure out how he's going to go back home. So, hey, let's go back to Polymarket and let's make a bunch of money on the Mexican election. And from there, it's just been amazing.
It's interesting you bring up the election. I think one of the most fascinating parts about prediction markets is it's a bit of art and a bit of science. I think all trading is like that. Obviously for an election in Portugal, Dave, you went to actually go to Portugal to go and understand how the election was going and meet people there, and you were on the ground. Whereas, Domer, when you were continuing to like make a bet that Biden would not resign from the presidency, that felt like it was a little bit more vibes-based, and it was, if he put a lot of effort into running for office, he wouldn't necessarily drop out. So this is like kind of two sides of, like the right brain and left brain. Would love to hear, like, what do you guys think it is? Do you think it's more science or is it more art?
I mean, I think it could be either one. I think there are traders that specialize more on the art side of the equation, which I would, maybe call qualitative, right? They're trying to figure out a problem that hasn't really been solved before or something like that. Whereas, there are a lot of qualitative traders that are trying to figure out, okay, the election results are starting to come in, who's actually ahead. There are definitely people that have models and statistics. So I think it can be either one depending on what you're trying to do as a trader. But I think overall the question is also, is it more of an art or a science? Well, it's a lot of work, basically. I mean, you have to put in a lot of hours and a lot of time to do it, especially if you're going to do it seriously. Because, on any given market, you can be lucky and win, but if you want to do it consistently over a long period of time, you have to put in a lot of work.
Ken is absolutely correct about that. Unfortunately, nothing's easy. You can't just hop on one of these predictions. I mean, you can if you're extremely lucky, but then you're just going to give it right back. So I'm on the qualitative side, which doesn't necessarily earn the respect of a lot of the quants, but it's okay because there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I was in France visiting family, and all of a sudden we know that the presidential election is happening in Portugal. So I grabbed a cousin of mine who's a documentarist, grabbed the risk manager, Jeremy, who's here with us today, and I said, let's go to Portugal. And we ended up interviewing 100 people, and we did a video that ended up being published on the Polymarket Oracle as part of an article that Will did. And what we found was that the polls were somewhat misleading because there was a guy named Mendes who was leading the polls for the presidential election, but when we interviewed people, we got like, oh, yeah, I'll probably vote for Mendes, whereas with the other two of the other candidates, Skoro and Kotrim, the young people loved Kotrim. They're like, we're definitely voting for Kotrim, and so we took that nuance to see that Mendes was losing support, ended up putting a bunch of money no on Mendes and yes on some of the other guys, and we had a super fun trip in Portugal and made a bunch of money. So there's definitely a way to get alpha that's qualitative, that's part of a story, and that you can't find necessarily through quantitative measures.
I think the next thing that most people here would be very interested about is, what do you guys think about the whole idea of like insider trading with prediction markets? There are people who say that if you have an edge and that comes from, a non-traditional way of understanding the market, maybe in a way that people would seem as potentially being insider, you ought to do it because it makes the market more efficient. The counter to that is obviously you can't have someone, like making a prediction right before a major announcement who has that information and can dump on retail. So how do you guys view it?
Well, I mean, for a very long time, prediction markets have existed for a little bit of a while. Like, it was a meme that it was an insider, right? You would trade in a market and it's like, oh, someone actually knows the answer. Most of the time, 99% of the time, it was not anything to do with an insider. But that has kind of morphed over the past 18 months where you're much more alert about it, and I think they've arrested people. So, I mean, as a trader, it's very frustrating because you're accepting the odds as what they are. You're accepting that you're betting against other people. Prediction markets are mano a mano, they're zero sum. So if I'm winning, someone else is losing and vice versa. Well, if the dice are kind of, stacked against you to where someone already has the answer, that can be very frustrating as a trader. It makes you less likely to want to trade. It makes you less likely to provide liquidity. I've provided a lot of liquidity over the years. Like, you just want to withdraw that. Like, why would I want someone who knows the answer to just steal money from me, basically? But, the rules are as they are, and so if sites are like, well, we will allow insiders, then you have to navigate that as a trader. So it's just something, as of right now, it's just another calculation as you're trying to figure out the odds.
Dave?
It's a philosophical debate, and I think it's up to society to decide. I mean, we can't control everything. At the end of the day, I think that there ought to be some type of identity disclosure, like if you're a whale and you're making $500,000 on a political market and you just happen to know what's going to happen like 10 minutes before it happens, probably society ought to know who you are. And then if you have access to government info, that's probably not a really good thing for society. So I tend to fall on the greater good. We'll see.
Yeah, that's actually a question I've thought about. Do you think doxed profiles would make sense for some of these markets? Like, obviously, if you're in a market and the counterparty on something like related to the Strait of Hormuz is someone who, has the last name Khomeini, maybe you'd be less likely to, be the counter position for that, right? But the counter to this is like obviously a lot of internet culture. You guys use, like Domer, Scottilicious are very clearly not your legal names. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think, people have brought this up with social media, that, you should have no undoxed accounts. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, if you look at the stock market, that's not the case. If you buy a big position, you have to file disclosure reports and stuff like that. But as an everyday person, if you buy a stock, you don't have to report it to all your neighbors or anything. So I think, it's a little bit of an unfair burden, and I think it would make people more reticent to use prediction markets if their name has to be attached, especially if you're betting on a presidential race, and then it's okay, your neighbors now know that you're betting on Trump. It could lead to some bad things, I think. So I'm not sure that I would go as far as doxed people. And then just to briefly tag on to your answer about, insider trading, I think one thing that people have to realize, because I think it's a little bit more nuanced whether insiders are allowed or not. The majority of users of Polymarket and Kalshi are not traders, right? Most of the people that access the site are just looking at the odds. They care about who's going to win the game. They care about who's going to win the presidential election. So from that perspective, from those users' perspective, if an insider is making the number more accurate, then that's, there's at least something to be said for that. I'm not necessarily making the argument, but, there's at least something to be said for more accurate information in the marketplace for the user.
You, in 2024, I believe, had a counter position on CZ, the well-known CEO of Binance, being released before a certain token came out. And it was actually, I think at that time you were the number one trader on Polymarket. And the counter position, or the counter trader, was, I think, the worst trader on Polymarket. And then he found a way to just get, I guess, inside info, or whatever it is. I'm not making any accusations, but he was able to, really, I guess, rinse you on that. How do you feel about that specific situation, where it does seem like maybe there was some form of, yeah?
Yeah, that's a little bit true. So the reason he was the biggest loser is because he was wrong about Biden dropping out. He basically bet millions of dollars that Biden would not drop out. And so he lost that. He's a very, very smart guy, but he lost that specific bet. And then the CZ thing was just him assuming that the world was one way. He assumed, okay, CZ is sentenced to 6 months in prison. He's getting out on this date. And I knew that it was a little bit more nuanced. As soon as you're sentenced, there's a whole process. And so I was taking long shot bets against him, and he ended up winning by, I think, 36 hours. I think CZ was released 36 hours before the deadline, or else I would have won a big bet off of him. Yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of on that note, do you feel a personal relationship with the people you're taking a counter position with? Obviously, in traditional finance, this is the case. Bill Ackman versus Carl Icahn on, Herbalife was one of the most well-known personal beefs that bled into an actual financial decision. Do you feel this way about the people you're counter trading on prediction markets?
Well, we all have a huge amount of copy traders. So if we want to trade on our main profiles, you have the same thing, I'm sure, right? We have 30 bots who immediately place the same trade. We also, I don't know about Ken, but I'm on a few Discord servers with people I've gotten to know over the years. And even if you don't meet them, it's almost like having a beer with the guys after work, because there's some really crazy, volatile, stressful days, especially in war situations like with the Iran war. And then you have this camaraderie where you get together on Discord and say, hey, I did this. What do you think about this? How do you see this resolution? So personally, I try to avoid beef. I try to collaborate. And even if I disagree with someone, I'll try to do it in a civil way. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. But thankfully, I haven't gotten involved in any big, throwdown fights yet. How about you?
I can take a very adversarial approach against people for sure. I've gotten into some big fights, but I think also by the same token, I have respect for something. If I'm betting big, there's a counterparty that's also betting big, and I may have my reasons, but they also have their reasons, and I also have to respect that they've put some effort into their thesis, and maybe there's some validity to it that I have not realized. So you also have to be a bit humble, even if you're also adversarial at the same time.
Yeah, and on the concept of resolutions, this used to be at least one of the biggest issues that people brought up with prediction markets. It was UMA's optimistic oracle. How do you guys feel about the decentralized approach towards resolving a market. Obviously, Kalshi and Polymarket have very fundamental disagreements on this, and you guys are both, well-known Polymarket guys, so maybe you have a bit of a bias, but would like to hear your thoughts on the optimistic oracle.
I think it's great. I think that people interpret reality differently. I mean, obviously, look at the polarization in our politics. I mean, these people have no agreement on what reality is. So if you look at prediction markets as a truth-seeking mechanism, you can at least get some consensus. And initially, people are going to strongly disagree, but at the end of the day, there's a legit vote. Everybody gets to try to convince the others. And I think Domer and I have both been able to convince people on some of these Discord servers that our way of thinking about a specific prediction is the way to go. So I'm all for it.
I have a little bit of a hotter take than I mean, I've definitely used it to my advantage sometimes, but I think UMA as kind of an idea has failed because they, if you're going to have people make decisions for especially multi-million-dollar, $10 million, $100 million markets, there needs to be some accountability or some stake in the outcome in terms of, okay, if we get this wrong, then we need to fix this in the future. Whereas I think there's not much learning from prior mistakes with UMA. There's not much accountability. So I think that aspect of it has kind of failed. And I do think the future of Polymarket is probably a token that replaces UMA. And so you have people that actually are invested in the future of Polymarket that are deciding the outcomes of these fights.
And we're at the very initial stages, right? So UMA was how they decided to do it. Obviously, there's going to be an evolution, but I maintain that nothing's going to be perfect. You watch, they're going to come up with the poly token. People are going to disagree on, who should get the poly token. Should you have more votes if you have more of the token? There's like a bazillion and one disagreements, but hopefully things will evolve and become more fair, more transparent.
I mean, do you think it's important for the philosophy of prediction markets for it to be a decentralized resolution mechanism instead of like what Kalshi does, where it's far more prescriptive?
I think my personal opinion would be that you should marry some sort of centralized guidance with a decentralized resolution. Because here's the thing, like if you push the entire decision onto a decentralized mechanism, well, they were not involved with forming the question. So a lot of nuance probably went into that question. So you really need to hear from the people who designed the market in the first place. Like, what did I mean when I made this market? Why did I make this market? What's the point of it, right? The opinion on that may be different depending on the voter in the decentralized. So I think, yes, decentralized can work with some guidance from the people that wrote the market, like this is what we meant, this is what the market's all about.
I still fall on the side of decentralized because you can have an ill-conceived question that's poorly written, and the answer shouldn't be based on how, shouldn't necessarily be based on how the person who wrote the question thought people were going to react to it, because that person may have a very poor vocabulary or very poor reasoning, and so decentralization offers a solution to that.
I think the other thing that would be interesting on this is, with the way it works with UMA, it's the person who has the most tokens has the final, or like, so that person can fundamentally sway a market. So it's almost like he who has the most capital has the greatest, at least is able to determine truth, which seems very philosophically, at least not aligned with crypto and probably not with prediction markets, which brands itself as like a truth mechanism.
Yeah, so just to tag on to what David said earlier, I think, every solution is going to be at least a little bit bad, and you're just trying to find the least bad solution. But yes, the biggest token holder ever since I joined Polymarket in December of 2020. And since that point, well, I think Yuma joined a little bit later, but since Yuma has been around, the biggest token holder has changed, like, let's say 6 times. And every single time it's been like some super influential person. Well, that the opinions of if it's changing 6 times, then you have very different opinions, so it can become a little bit chaotic, especially if people are following the leader on the biggest holder.
Agreed, and it's far from perfect, and I don't, I see some of the same faults that Ken sees, and also, you've had funky markets where people are hoping to make like 20 times their money by disputing, or maybe in certain instances 100 times by disputing a market, and then you'll see all these new profiles trying to convince people on Discord to vote a certain way. So obviously there's inefficiencies. It's far from perfect. It was, having someone who has like 7 million tokens or something is a little bit weird. So there's definitely some room for improvement for sure.
Yeah, and I know the UMA team, and I like them a lot. I think they're working on it. So, but kind of going in the context of Kalshi versus Polymarket, there's a bit of like a Messi versus Ronaldo rivalry here between the two. Obviously, you guys are on the side of Polymarket. Would love to hear where do you see the space of prediction markets evolving? Do you think it's going to be a bit of a the Messi versus Ronaldo rivalry helped with creating a lot more popularity for soccer in the United States? Do you think that is kind of part of the engine that's fueling a lot of the growth in the United States for prediction markets? Or do you think it's just such an open industry that there's a lot of players that are going to come in soon?
Okay, so people are already leveraging, for instance, Kalshi in terms of order flow. So you've got Robinhood sending orders to Kalshi and taking a commission, which is crazy. So if any of you guys are I got nothing against Robinhood, but if you want to bet on some of these prediction markets, go directly to the prediction market. So, because ultimately in our current state of affairs, people are motivated by money. And so if they can capture more market share by giving other people commissions, they're going to do that. So I would just, I would caution the end user to just be very careful and make sure you're using whatever mechanism is the least costly to effectuate your predictions.
As far as the future, over the next few years, obviously Polymarket and Kalshi have a huge lead, and such a big problem when you're creating a prediction market. Let's say you create a prediction market. Well, how do you get liquidity on there, right? It's a chicken and egg problem. If there's no liquidity, it's hard to get users. If there's no users, it's hard to get liquidity. So they have a huge head start, but that does not mean that they can't be overtaken, because I think by the same token, we as traders are very agnostic about platform, right? It's all about cost, it's all about liquidity, fees. We're very, if you look at sports bettors, they don't care whether they're betting on FanDuel or Betfair, or they care about price, right? Yeah. What's the cheapest price? And so I think prediction market traders can be mercenaries in that sense. So I don't think there's a ton of brand loyalty to the companies themselves, and I think there could be room for a company, provided that the company figures out the liquidity issues.
It does seem like they're going down a bit of a consumer branding route, though. You have the Polymarket bar in DC, I believe. Have either of you guys gone to those? I think there's a Polymarket bar in DC.
Oh, no, I have not. Yeah. No, I've not physically gone to it, no. Yeah.
Well, you should.
So right before it came out, I had a cousin in France that said we should open up a Polymarket cafe in Dubai, and then a week later I hear about this DC thing. So I think it's a great, the concept is great. It's good to have some human interaction, to share ideas and what have you, but I haven't been yet.
Do you see it becoming more of an in-person thing? These kinds of, obviously physical kiosks in the United Kingdom are very popular for betting, and that's a cultural aspect of the United Kingdom. Do you think that'll happen in the United States, or do you think it's going to stay mainly digital?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, prediction market trading in general is kind of an isolating, kind of like a Ronin type existence where you're just doing your own thing on your computer or your phone. So there's not much interaction with the real world usually. That's not always the case. But so yeah, it's hard to envision, but yeah, potentially.
I think there's pretty good potential for that. I look at my dad, who was a horse racing aficionado for his entire life, and he was 88 years old and jamming 20 minutes down the street in France to the PMU, which is where you bet on horses, and it was his social life. He would stay 3 hours there, talk to other people. So I think there's definitely a huge potential for that.
My final question is going to be just on the idea of retail traders. I think I checked the Dune dashboard right before this. Polymarket has around 150,000 traders who are actively using it, and this is during March Madness, so there are more users than usual. Do you think that the fact that most of the traders in Polymarket are quite sophisticated and they'll go to Portugal to do on the ground research about an actual market would dissuade people from wanting to participate in something like this? Do you think that there's a feeling that people on these platforms are a little too intelligent for retail to want to participate against, or Like, how do you guys view this like dynamic?
I mean, that's an interesting question because yes, I think that the odds are a lot sharper in the sense that, you're competing against much smarter people, especially versus when I first joined Polymarket. And even zooming back to when I was first doing prediction markets, I mean, it was just super easy. I mean, you're just shooting fish in a barrel. But I mean, these days it's very, very, very hard. There's a lot of like super smart people. So I could see it being, the sophistication level being kind of an hindrance to new users. By the same token, prediction markets have got so big like laterally, like there's just so many markets that I think, retail users can be attracted to their very specific like area of either expertise or interest. Like someone who's a Taylor Swift superfan can show up to Kalshi or Polymarket. There's probably 20 markets on Taylor Swift right now. It's just so that there's very interesting like corners of prediction markets that can still attract retail people for sure.
I think there's, in the United States in particular, there's sort of a segment of the population that has an anti-intellectual undercurrent who don't respect scientists or authors or anybody for that matter. And there's also a rebellious undercurrent where people want to do their own thing. And I think the rebellious part I think is cool. So you're going to have people who are going to, and also in the hyper-politically polarized society in which people live across all these different countries, people are going to bet on their team. They're going to view it like a football game. So they're going to say, oh, I love, Trump, so I'm going to bet on Trump. And even if, like they might bet on Republicans winning the House of Reps in November, and I'm going to take the other side of that trade. But, all the football team guys go for it because we need to make more money.
Are there markets that retail would have edge over people like you who spend your whole day looking at these markets?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, because if I'm doing this professionally and I have a huge portfolio, like I can only track so many things at once. Yeah, I'm a human being. Even if I have employees or automated systems, there's only so much I can do. Whereas someone who knows, I was at the Kalshi event and one of the guys sitting next to me was like an expert on the charts, the music charts, and he was just he was crushing it. And he's a teacher. Right? One of his friends told him that he was like, what are you talking about? I can bet on the charts. So I think there are people that definitely have interest and expertise that can crush someone like me because they have knowledge that I wouldn't even know exists in the first place.
And it's good to have smart friends. I mean, if you have friends who have different, interests, let's talk to them. Make sure you don't lose track of what they're up to.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's like if Substack made everyone like a writer, prediction markets makes everyone maybe a sophisticated trader in their own domain. That's it for my questions. If anyone from the crowd has something, please raise your hand. Ish.
What tools do you guys use to
Leverage, as in more money. Well, I mean, leverage is very, very hard, and it literally in terms of more money. But getting edge would be, yeah. So I mean, that has changed over time. Now, I was just having this conversation with someone else. I think there's two big facets to edge, which is number one, speed. That's big in sports, and that's getting the information the absolute fastest. If you can get a Trump tweet 1 second before everyone else, that's a $50,000 edge or whatever. So number one is speed, and then number two is the quality, obviously, of the information. And that comes from experience. That comes from because if there's some big event and there's some big news article that comes out, everyone that's trading that market, 50,000 people are all reading the same article at the same time. It's a matter of who can analyze that the best, who can take the best information from it. So yeah, there's edge for sure, and it can be hard to figure out how to exploit it.
I guess my question is, are you using LLMs like Claude to source your own data from proprietary sources? How do you evaluate, how do you come across a decision making? We saw forecasting, future search, so AI, does something like that appeal to you, or would you dismiss something?
I personally don't use much AI. I think international news sources like Al Jazeera, Times of Israel, Le Monde in France, a bunch of stuff like that. But interestingly, if you absorb enough information from all over the place, so like last month, and March was a stellar month, and in March, I was just kind of doom scrolling X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and I ran across Tom Tillis completely berating Kristi Noem, not about her husband, but about her tenure at DHS and corruption and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, this is kind of bizarre. This is a Republican administration. They agree on a lot of the same stuff when it comes to immigration, and he's just totally like yelling at her. And then you had Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana doing the same thing. And I was like, you know what? We need to buy some Noam out in March, and we grabbed some at like 15 cents. I tried to grab it at 10, but someone was ahead of me. And that little tidbit of info led to an 8x gain in like 3 days. So I don't think there's for me, there's not like a necessary finite resource. You just keep looking at all these different resources and cast a wide net is what I would say.
And do you guys participate in other categories outside politics?
I bet on everything. I mean, really, except for sports, because
You don't do NBA.
no, I mean, sports is a whole different thing, and I've talked to some professional sports traders, and they're far more sophisticated than I will ever be. So I don't try to compete with them. But to your previous question, I use AI quite a lot, especially when you encounter a new question and you're not even sure of the contours of, like, let's say, for instance, it's 2 months ago and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the Strait of Hormuz. Well, I barely know where that is on the map. Right, and that's the extent to which I have knowledge on it. So, an AI can be a fast track to becoming an expert. Like normally, let's say 2 years ago, it would have taken me 3 hours to become an expert. Now it takes me perhaps 20 minutes or whatever.
So I like it when eccentric people do crazy shit. So when Kanye was going to potentially launch a token, I think part of the rule set was it had to be on Coinbase and another exchange to the tune of like tens of millions. And I was like, that's not going to happen. So that's a market where I deviated from my usual political stuff. It was like very nerve-wracking because I was like on vacay and the market went from like 80 to 30 back to 60. And I'm like, please, I just want to go to the beach, yo. But sometimes it pays. You just got to be careful.
Does anyone have any questions? We'll take 2 questions.
Yeah, a red sweater.
Going to have to become more one-dimensional and focus on a specific silo in order to be competitive? Thanks.
I think, there's some truth to that. I mean, I do think you're going to have to find something that you're doing a lot better than everyone else and kind of develop that. But by the same token, prediction markets are getting, as I mentioned, they're getting super wide, right? So, and there's a lot of money involved. So even though my edge over time, whereas in 2006 when I first started, it was very easy to make money. Like I can make money in my sleep. Whereas now it's more difficult to make money,